In this video, we're going to be working exercise 9.5a. That's on page 343 of your textbook, and it is work paper 293. So work paper 293 and textbook page 343. So 9.5a says Angel Ruiz owns a small business called Ruiz Construction Company. He does his banking at Citizens National Bank in Portland, Oregon. The amounts in his general ledger for payroll taxes and the employee's withholding of Social Security, Medicare, and federal income tax payable as of April 15th of the current year are as follows. So these are the balances in the general ledger. Social Security tax payable has a balance of $11,250. So that is both what was withheld from the employee and what we calculated or would have been calculated as owed by the employer. So both shares of the liability are included in that balance. Same for Medicare tax. Medicare tax payable is the balance is $2,625. That includes both what would have been withheld from the employee's earnings and what the employer would have to pay. Both included in that balance. FUTA tax payable has a balance of $600. SUTA tax payable has a balance of $4,050, and employee income tax payable is $6,825. And I'll remind you that that is the federal income tax withholding that we calculated for each employee. That was in Chapter 8. Federal income tax is only withheld from the employee. That is not an employer tax. So we haven't talked about that again in Chapter 9 until now. So on your general ledger, these are the balances in those 5 different liability accounts. And it says to journalize the quarterly payment of the employee federal income tax and Social Security and Medicare taxes on April 15th. If you listen to the video where I cover the chapter, you can recall that when the Social Security, Medicare, and federal income tax withholding have to be paid, depends on various circumstances, but I told you for our purposes, we're going to assume that those 3 have to be paid on the 15th of the following month. So all of these balances that we're looking at would have been March 31st balances from the March payroll. And now it's April 15th and we have to pay those. Also, if you remember, we talked about that those 3 taxes, Social Security, Medicare, and federal income tax, are reported together. They're paid together and they're reported together on the form 941. So we usually refer to those as the 941 taxes. That's Social Security, Medicare, and the federal employee income tax. So our first requirement is to record the payment of those 3 on April 15th. So on April, let me try this date again. April 15th, we're going to pay those 3 taxes. So anytime you're paying a liability, you're going to debit the liability account. So we're going to debit employee income tax payable. I'm going to abbreviate because this pen writes so big. We're going to debit employee income tax payable for the balance in the ledger. The total we owe, $6,825. Then we're going to debit Social Security tax payable. For the balance in the ledger, again, which is the total we owe of $11,250. Then we're going to debit Medicare tax payable the balance in the general ledger, which is the total we owe, $2,625. So if you remember, as we went through the chapter, we said that we would pay these with an electronic funds transfer, with a deposit to the bank for this, and I don't want to confuse you when I say deposit to the bank. The electronic funds transfer is a transfer to the bank, who will then forward the money to the government. But when you are paying liabilities, remember that you will debit each of the liability accounts, and our credit, of course, is going to be to cash. We're coming out of our checking account to pay these liabilities. So our credit to cash, $20,700. Always double check that your debits equal your credits. And your explanation, you could put deposit of federal income tax, Social Security, and Medicare taxes, or you can simply just put deposit of 941 taxes, because remember, collectively we call Medicare, Social Security, and employee income tax 941 taxes, because they are all reported together on that federal form 941. Okay, so that's the first entry. Then in our second requirement says to record the payments of the FUTA and SUTA taxes on April 30th. Now the FUTA is going to be paid to the federal government, and the SUTA is going to be paid to the state government, so those are going to require separate entries. Those are going to be separate payments. So let's do FUTA first. So on the 30th, we'll pay the FUTA balance of $600. So of course, when you're paying a liability, you're going to debit the liability account. So we'll debit FUTA tax payable for $600. And we're going to credit cash for $600. And debits equal credits, and we will just enter an explanation, paid FUTA tax. Okay, and then we need to pay the state unemployment tax. So also this will be on the 30th. And when you're paying a liability, you're going to debit the liability account. So we'll debit SUTA tax payable for $4,050. And then of course, when you're paying a liability, you're going to credit cash, and that would be $4,050. And then our explanation for this one, paid SUTA tax. Okay, so that is the payment of the three types of taxes: the 941 taxes, the FUTA tax, and the SUTA tax.